This is the Endo meeting on Wednesday, April 30th. We have topics, starting with immutable array buffer versus Hermes, and then a bit about Pastyle and a little bit about the bundler. Some preparatory talking about where OCAPN's going, that kind of thing. Mark, how are we going to settle this issue of immutable array buffer versus Hermes? My understanding is that the crux of it is that the shim that you're proposing for immutable array buffer uses makes use of private fields, and Hermes does not support private fields.
That is one issue. That one's actually the issue that was already suggested in Slack. Seems to already be an adequate answer to that, which is whose existing transformer are you guys using to compile JavaScript into Hermes JavaScript?
Yep, so that's the Hermes transform file, and that's using for imports with Babel related packages.
Okay, but that's already compiled. So, does the Hermes that we're currently targeting, does it support classes, just not private fields, or does it not even support classes?
Yeah, both are not supported. Yeah, I'd like to hear your suggestion. I have a suggestion too, but I'll.
Okay, so I think that the thing that was already in Slack, which is not from me, so speak up if you remember who posted this, which is for you guys to use your JavaScript to Hermes JavaScript compiler to compile classes to functions while compiling private fields to weak maps. And if that's hard, obviously we can just do a separate manual coding of the thing, essentially would have been that transformation. So that part I think is the easy part. The harder part is it sounds like Hermes does not have either an array buffer transfer nor a structured clone. Is that correct?
I didn't check. I only know about the classes and the private fields, but I didn't check array buffer.
I thought I saw something with an error message go by where the shim itself was complaining that it can't shim immutable array buffer without either structure clone or transfer.
Oh, right. Yeah. The error that's thrown at the end once the transforms are working. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but yeah, still good to check because I've never had an opportunity to test the diagnostic to be sure that it's erroring only when it should error. So yeah, if you could just manually check that Hermes has neither array buffer transfer nor structured clone, because if it has either one of those, then it's just a bug that the shim's not working.
Okay. Yeah.
But then, so just to push forward, so assuming the Hermes has neither of those, we don't actually need the full immutable array buffer spec. We don't need the whole thing shimmed. We just need enough to support byte array as a passable data type that can be encoded into the various things we encode passables into, including the syrup encoding that Kamavas is working on, as well as small caps, etc. We need to be able to encode into it and decode out of it. So the irony is, or the fortuitous coincidence is, that for completely other reasons, we ended up adding slice to immutable as an additional element of the immutable array buffer proposal. If Hermes array buffers have slice, please tell me they have slice, or even if they don't actually, we can emulate slice by putting a typed array on top, and then doing a copy of the contents of the typed array. And then we can use the existing hidden class that we've got in the shim hack for encapsulating, creating a new array buffer, mutable array buffer, which we encapsulate in our alleged immutable array buffer, which accomplishes the security goal. We can do that as an emulation of slice to immutable without being able to emulate transfer to immutable. So we see that we cannot emulate transfer to immutable, which we cannot if we have neither transfer nor structured clone. We can still emulate slice to immutable, and that gives us what we need. And then what the shim would do in that case is simply omit transfer to immutable, so that then the higher level, which is the passable implementation, can feature detect to say if the immutable array buffer, if array buffer has slice to immutable but does not have transfer to immutable, then we'll just implement the encoding and decoding using slice to immutable, which has an extra copy in it, but at that point, the extra copy is the least of our problems.
Cool.
So,
Okay, I think, yep.
So did all that make sense?
Yeah, I was just trying to follow it along in the code as well. So yeah, I found, yeah, you mentioned transfer to immutable. I see that. Slice to immutable. I see that. When you mentioned byte array earlier, I wasn't sure where that's coming from.
Right. Byte array is a terminology that's it is not a JavaScript term. Byte array is the name
Byte
of
array is the OCAPN term.
Yes.
Oh, right.
For the OCAPN data structure where the hardened JavaScript binding or the pass style binding of a OCAPN byte array is a frozen clean immutable array buffer.
That's the design anyway. That is we are attempting to lift up that into the implementation. I have a question for Richard. Do we have a Richard?
We have a Richard.
If we get that far soon as to having an immutable array buffer shimmed by SES, how close are we to, oh gosh, or just shimmed in general?
We've got a working shim of immutable array buffer. Just right now, the layering is slice to immutable is built on transfer to immutable, whereas this would be a feature detected relayering of building slice to immutable by other means, but with the same underlying implementation.
And that shim is the effect of initializing SES, right?
The shim would happen on initializing SES. That's correct.
All right. So Richard, for small caps, do we have a plan for supporting for having an immutable array buffer representation on the wire? Is that like base64 or hexadecimal with a reserved prefix? Can we do that in a backward and forward compatible way on the chain?
Well, we can't do it I mean, it's not, I can always get confused about forward and backward, but it's only compatible in one direction because.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not backwards compatible because, the current code would never recognize the prefix.
Okay. Forward compatible then. Can we do forward compatible?
We can.
Is this deployable?
Yep.
All right.
So actually Mark's got a draft PR up for that now, which I'm reviewing a little bit of today.
Did we Did we land on
Oh.
something like hex or base 64?
Wait, in the PR, it currently throws. It's a to do. But we know what we want the ordering to look like. It's going to be short lex. And that might not even come up anywhere. I guess it would if you had a set that can, if they were inside of a set. Yeah, so it will come up. The comparison is going to be short lex, and to be determined if the on the wire representation will be hex or base 64, but I can't imagine it would be anything else.
Yeah. Between those two, I can imagine fewer edge cases for hexadecimal than I can for base 64. Do we have, would base 64 introduce any possible likely ordering?
I'm back.
Oh,
Okay, welcome.
well,
Yeah, to answer Chris's question, I also would be inclined towards hex because it has the nice property that comparisons of the encoding are equivalent to comparisons of the encoded.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I've also got shims, besides a shim of immutable array buffer itself, I've got two more layers of shims in PRs that are in review, that that are declared ready for review at least, which is one which modifies SES to import the shim on SES initialization, and obviously to permit in permits.js the members that the shim brings in, including the hidden class, because otherwise it would be a hidden intrinsic that would not get frozen, which would violate our security. So all that's a PR that's ready to review. And then on top of that, I have the pass style PR that builds on the SES PR that classifies that validates that a array buffer is immutable and frozen and has no extraneous properties. At which point it is considered by pass style to be a byte array. Pass style of such an immutable array buffer gives the string byte array because the pass, we'd like to, the pass style names when we have the choice, we'd like them to more resemble the OCAPN names than resemble JavaScript names. And the passable byte array PR also tried to find. I need to revisit this, but it found, as of probably more than a year ago now, I don't remember, all of the places where we were switching on pass style and extended the switches to have a case for byte array. But in that PR, what most of those switches are extended to have is a case for byte array that just throws not yet implemented, with the intention that further PRs we fill in those on an as-needed basis, or until we're close enough to just complete it.
right. Yeah, so immutable array buffer solves half of the problems for OCAPN. The other one is symbol. And just to bring folks up to speed who might not be up to speed. Richard, are you up to speed on the issue with symbols?
Yeah, I think so. I've been following along.
Yeah.
I have an odd observation. You want to introduce the topic first before I bring in the odd observation?
Sure. So Aaron Kamavis pushed me in the direction of led me to realize that the distinguishing symbol, name OCAP calling them selectors and reifying them and reifying OCAP and selectors in JavaScript as an object was unnecessary to satisfy the constraints that I had assumed to exist. And that was that registered symbols in some JavaScript engines could be used as a vector for a registry stuffing attack, basically.
We believe it's actually all JavaScript engines.
No, not anymore.
Really?
SpiderMonkey does collect registered symbols.
Oh, wonderful.
V8 does not, though. So I contend that until and unless all JavaScript engines we might run OCAPN on collect registered symbols are not a viable representation.
Right. And in excess, they are also not viable.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But yeah, so basically, the status quo, at least, is that we cannot use registered symbols for OCAPN symbols. But the sticking point is that we do not need identity to work as the pass invariant equality operator for all model types. It already is the case that some model types don't use identity, like byte array, for example. And the distinction between primitive and non-primitive is unimportant because across languages, byte vector, for example, is primitive in some implementations than others. So my argument is that we could just use unregistered symbols and deal with the fact that they would impose some GC performance problems that we can largely mitigate. And then we just abuse them as OCAPN symbols in the job.
Why would unregistered symbols have a GC problem?
Every time they pass copy, you get a unique instance, a unique identity every time they transit.
Okay, so no more of a GC problem than byte arrays or copy arrays.
Possibly more than strings, but also maybe not. Depends.
Yeah, it depends on the engine's implementation of strings, but I would bet that engines do not. I bet there are 0 engines that eagerly in turn runtime strings.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would be no worse than string.
Okay.
And the performance of equality comparison would be no worse than string too. We'd be string comparing our symbols effectively. So that's the primer. Matthew wants to have a conversation about this, but I think that Matthew's angle is not that we should use objects to represent selectors, but that we can, in some cases or all cases, use registered symbols. But I believe that the crux of the misunderstanding is whether this is a performance issue or a security issue. I think
well, it's a performance issue, but in the sense of resource exhaustion, which is an availability threat, which is obviously a threat on the availability dimension of security.
Right.
It's not an integrity threat.
Right. So that's the primer. What's your observation, Mark?
Okay, so before the observation, some other things to just be aware of is that I've done a full PR that just violently switches over Endo from using registered symbols as passable and unregistered symbols as unpassable. It just completely flips that the other way around. And it seems to work. I was very, very pleased when I saw Chris calling it surgical change. I feel very proud of that. In any case, all of the work, it turned out, was on the Agoric SDK side to get Agoric SDK working with the Endo in which that was flipped. And essentially everything that broke in Agoric SDK were just test cases that were testing things around symbols. So it didn't actually break any useful code as far as I can tell. And the reason why the Endo level change was surgical is that when we first introduced this distinction of which kinds of symbols were passable and which ones were not, we had already abstracted that into the symbol module in the passstyle package, having functions name for passable symbol for name, things like that. So we were just able to, by changing which things those functions, that function implementation considered to be passable or not, that did a lot of what was needed as far as passstyle and Marshall were concerned. And then the other thing was there were just scattered a whole lot of calls to symbol open paren literal string or symbol.for open paren literal string. So I just did a blind global search and replace of those things into calls to the abstracting functions, passable symbol for name, and for the flip side, I added unpassable symbol for name. Okay, so that's all background. And by the way, both of those TRs are testing green, which was for the Agoric SDK level. I just can't tell you how tedious it was to just fix test cases. It's one of the things that annoys me. I may have no solution for this. Nobody does yet. Maybe AI will help, but we write zillions of test cases to beat the hell out of edge cases for a reason, including edge cases that no production code currently exercises. And then when we try to make use of the fact that no production code exercises it, so it won't be a breaking change, all of those test cases become a tremendous source of friction in bringing it about. But in any case, we paid that cost. We're on the other side. So first of all, before I give my odd observation, is everybody following so far?
With you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so one further thing that was a cost of a tremendous amount of tedium in fixing the test cases is that Ava has this thing called deep equal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been using deep equal just because of Ava's incredibly convenient support for it and good error messages when things are unequal, which we don't have any separate emulation for. We've been using that as a imperfect proxy for two passables being equal in our distributed object semantics. And that's been working well enough for our purposes until this change. And the reason is that the Ava deep equals, when it comes across symbols, uses symbol identity. So to take to go back to Matthew's argument, I think the core of Matthew's argument is also, if you're not using the symbol's identity, why are you using symbols? Because from a JavaScript semantics perspective, the only purpose of symbols is their identity. So if you're not using their JavaScript identity, why did you bind them to JavaScript symbols? So here's the experiment that I want to do instead, which is the representation that Chris came up with, that Kumavis implemented for selectors, is keep the name symbol, but the fact that the fact that I've done all the work to abstract all of the symbol creation to symbol for, passable symbol for name and unpassable symbol for name, is to have passable symbol for name give us that exactly the same object, but with the pass style field saying I am a symbol. Rather than saying I am a selector, just use the term symbol rather than selector, referring to the OCAPN symbol. And if I've abstracted all of that adequately, then it should be a drop-in replacement given the work that those two PRs are already doing. Now, here's the bizarre payoff of that, which is Ava's deep equal would work on that struct.
Yeah, it would.
It would. That's a big deal because, it's
Okay.
to ask people writing Ava test cases not to reach for deep equal.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah, so one thing about calling them symbols and modeling them as symbols is that you might expect to be able to use them as keys in structs and things like that. And we don't support that in the OCAPN struct. It has to be a string.
Yeah, but the OCAPN structs and of course, therefore, our own copy records don't insist on only string name properties. And the other thing I did in these PRs, which was essential, and in fact, it would have been essential even if we weren't doing the rest of this, is just because of how we're binding things in OCAPN, we had to turn off the ability for remotable objects to have symbol named methods. So remotable objects must only have string named methods. And given that
That's not exactly what we landed on.
it is what we landed on.
What we landed on was that the JavaScript representation of an object bearing methods would be would use string named methods, and all methods would be string named. There would be no symbol. There would be no observable JavaScript. You couldn't invoke a method with a symbol name from eventual send. Just that.
Well, then the general principles that the whole passable object binding is based on, I claim, would then insist that remotables cannot have methods that are that are locally invocable but not remotely invocable. I mean, that's one thing that's asking for a confused equity problem.
I believe all of the constraints are satisfied. There is only one data model type that corresponds to method invocation. In JavaScript, it's string. On the wire is an OCAPN symbol. It never.
Right. Yeah, in OCAPN, because all method names are symbols, and because we map OCAPN symbols in that position to JavaScript strings, all remotables have to have only string named methods.
Right.
Okay,
yes.
So you agree with that.
The edge is that if we add support, so on the guile side, they implement objects with methods as functions that receive the method invocation as a guile symbol corresponding to the okapen symbol from the delivery args.
Yeah.
If in order to model the equivalent arbitrary function receiver for deliveries on the Java side, which we do not.
Well, yeah, but our plan is to actually change the way we're binding far functions to okapen, so that the far functions, which we already have, well, we already sort of have, to fully support far functions, and then use far functions in that role, which is sort of exactly the okapen ontology.
Yes.
And it's actually very useful, because what that means is that if you want to do the same kind of meta level that proxies do for objects, so that you can have abstract over all of the property names with the equivalent thing for the wire protocol is you just use a far function, and then if it's invoked as if the far function is invoked as an object, then that's a circumstance where the first argument to the far function would be an R binding for an okapen symbol.
Yes. Okay. We're on the same page then. We are on the same page then.
Okay. But it's the objects, it's the remotable objects that have to have only string named methods.
Correct.
Okay.
In the JavaScript reification, all methods of an object are string.
Okay. So therefore, in the passable subset of JavaScript, which increasingly is what I'm intended, what I find myself programming to, that these, the fact that the selectors, which are named, the fact that the okapen symbols turn into JavaScript objects, and objects can't be used as names, as property names, is not at all in conflict with passable, because there's no circumstance where something that a JavaScript object that is passable can have a symbol named property other than at the meta level of determining which passable it is.
Okay, so Kumavis, how satisfying would it be to you if we in pastyle reified okapen symbols as object with pastyle symbol?
I think it's fine. I might want to stick with the selector term just because it's not symbol. It's not a symbol. We don't call it a symbol. Though the name itself, selector, doesn't really make sense. Because selectors can appear anywhere in arguments, and using it to pick the name of a function on an object is just one of its uses, and is maybe convention and not standard.
I mean, if we went back and forth on the name hard.
Yeah, naming things hard. Since it's not being reified as if it's not being reified as a symbol, I think I would prefer to not call it a symbol.
Okay.
I think that even if we do that, I would still like to call it a symbol in okapen, because that helps us keep friends on the other side of the wire. I also do not mind if Mark mentioned earlier a preference for having okapen names in the pastyle. I do not share that. I don't think that they have to be They don't have to be.
Well, it's too late for have to be, because we already have some divergences that cannot be repaired.
Yes.
But but given a choice, I mean, for a new name, given a choice of being closer to OCAPN versus JavaScript. Byte array is a perfect example. Is I want pass style of a clean, frozen, immutable array buffer to be byte array because that's the name we settled on in OCAPN.
So I don't act. So Mark originally proposed the name selector as a response to me proposing the object representation for symbols. This isn't something that I care too much about.
Did you and me and Kumavis, have we rotated through several positions now?
It seems like I think that we shifted musical chairs at least once.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I just have one remaining reason for preferring. Well, first of all, if I would only, if we sticking with the name symbol in OCAPN, then I would still want pass style of to say symbol.
Okay.
If we want pass style of to say selector, then I would want to go back. I mean, we already got agreement in OCAPN for selector, and the fact that we changed our mind to everyone's relief. We can just, we all did find it acceptable at one point. Now I have a further reason to why to prefer symbol for the pass style of, even if they're not a JavaScript symbol, is because we already have reserved symbol as one of the choices in the output of pass style of itself. It's in the enum of what pass style of can return, and that case is already bound to, for example, a small caps representation that we're associating with the pass style of symbol. And I certainly, whether we rename it selector or not, I would want to just have one, not support both, and then reuse for selector the small caps representation that we're currently using for symbol.
All right, I find that all convincing. This isn't the last week we have to argue about it, but it's good to have the abstraction and pass style. All right. Okay, so I'm going to say that our tentative consensus is that we will represent OCAPN symbols as objects with pass style symbol, and that we will have an abstraction for pass style symbol for name, and vice versa, that we'll try to use throughout, and hopefully hopefully this position sticks for a week. I don't know. Let's see. We have three. Okay, I don't know what ZB wants to talk about, but it's probably important. And we also have some bundle
not
source
urgent.
wisdom, and we also have some compartment mapper topic that has slipped from the back of my mind. Let's start with the bundle wisdom topic.
I am also happy to yield my time to a technical concern. If there's something very technical that needs to be resolved, mine is more a design question, like why shouldn't I use ambient authority, but in a more particular case.
That should be quick, right?
Well,
I don't know where to start.
no. I mean, there's a very specific situation.
Okay,
like I said-
ZB, your audio just got very muddled.
Not ZB. Grupez, you're far away.
I see. Well, I'm having some connection issues, I suppose. The situation is if I control both bundle source and import bundle, then it might be quite convenient to me to offer the interface to developers who want to write source code that will be bundled, for them to declare the endowments that they need for their code via import. And if I'm able to both bundle their code and control the import hook that is actually provided to their code, then in that case, why shouldn't they acquire authority via import?
I mean, having the thing declare what endowments it wants by listing a bunch of names does not itself automatically give it that authority. Somebody has to decide. Somebody that has the authority has to also make a decision to grant the thing that authority, which I thought we already have support for. And anything more automatic than that is omitting a policy decision that seems essential.
So to wit, we have bundle source and import bundle. There's a third mode that doesn't use a bundle as an intermediate. That's import location in compartment mapper, where you just give it the file to start at, and then it builds the application without creating an intermediate bundle. And in that case, you can provide an import hook that says, hey, you can have whatever you want. You can also say import bundle with an import hook that says, hey, you can have everything you want from the host. And that is a policy decision.
Yeah, there's nothing
You're
ambient about it. It's somebody
Yeah.
with the authority is making a policy decision to grant the authority.
Yeah.
My concern with this is to whom are you granting the authority? This treats the bundle
Right.
as a whole as a unit of trust, but the bundle is assembled from sort of the transitive closure of the imports of whatever it is, and therefore there might be some downstream dependency that you're not aware of that you had thought was a powerless package, but in fact, if it suddenly from the environment acquires the ability to import some authority when you didn't really intend to give it to that, you intended to give it to something higher in the graph, then
that I think is orthogonal.
okay.
Why?
Because lava moat policy, if you have a lava moat
Okay.
policy imposed, a lava moat policy stands between your third-party dependencies and your own import hook.
Okay. So
Yeah,
so,
that had been my thinking on this, and Ryan and I have been debating this, and I suggested he bring it before this group because you know, basically many different ways of saying ambient authority is bad, and the more different ways you have of saying that, the better the odds of complete understanding getting communicated. But lava moat seems like if we are in an environment where lava moat exists, then that may in fact be the answer, is that we defer the transitive trust issue to lava moat.
That seems
note that Endo's compartment mapper also supports policy for a while now, which gives pretty much equal capability in that area.
Yeah. So what is the plan for lava moat? What I thought I understood is that you guys are going to be bringing lava moat into Endo, possibly layered on top of the compartment mapper expression of policy.
We are finishing the work on rebuilding lava moat for Node on top of Endo, where some of the functionality, some of the convenience and defaults that lava moat was providing is not part of how Endo does policy. So Endo policy is more like machine code to us, and we are building potentially more human readable policies on top of that, with the ability to go further and maybe one day say this package wants network, and
Okay.
have that be translated into a more specific policy. So there's a bunch of features that Lav Mode is still providing.
Good.
Surprisingly
exact-
much.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the answer I was hoping for, because certainly the policy expressiveness that Endo by itself is providing without Lava Mode, seeing that as a compilation target for human readable policy, I think is exactly the right view. And you know, and as part of that view, I think Endo needs Lava Mode before Endo can serve. It's only Endo with Lava Mode that can actually serve the purposes for which we built Endo.
Well, I like to think of it as peanut butter and chocolate. Flavors that are better together.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. All right. Ryan, how dissatisfying was this answer?
I enjoyed the answer very much. It pointed to some things to look at in the concrete. And
Yeah.
Chip, how satisfying was this answer?
I moderately. I love the idea of deferring a complicated ball of hair to somebody else who's already made it their business to deal with that ball of hair. That appeals to me very much. Um, the fact that that something else is not completely integrated yet is perhaps an issue, and the fact that it buries everything under another layer of stuff that I don't completely understand
Yeah.
is also a little concerning to me. But I think this is the the nature of modern civilization. So
So I think in summary, I think in summary, today, in the absence of tooling for Lava Mode on top of Endo, the only place that you have to express an intent for whether a bundle should be able to access certain host powers is the import hook. And you, for now, should be very explicit there about which host powers you expect the bundle to reach for. And then maybe someday soon, we'll be able to generate Lava Mode policies as part of the bundling procedure. And when that happens, then creating a whitelist, not a whitelist, a wild card, a wild card import hook for import bundle would be safer, assuming that the bundler and the importer are the same person.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that is going on here is attempting to play nice with the existing code ecosystem, for which importation is the accepted, unfortunately, means by which one acquires authority.
Yeah.
I want to make sure ZB gets time for his topic.
Yes, ZB.
Yeah.
Before I go into that topic, I have one quick suggestion for the previous one. You don't have to express everything as part of the import hook, because you can already use a module attenuator set as default attenuator in Endo policy, which will be a single declaration of a function that gets called on everything you import, and you can decide to attenuate it however you want in there without messing with the import hook itself, the implementation.
And the
So
attenuator,
that's something
the
you can
attenuator
explore.
package gets embedded inside of your compartment map, which is, so yeah, if you're expressing your intent in code, your intentions get bundled with your application. It is a pretty cool feature.
So this is like a hook.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So hopefully
That's what-
quick question. Does lockdown provide a list of intrinsics that it's aware of that's consumable by the end user of lockdown, in this case lava mode, specifically scuttling, if we would like to omit destroying them because they're considered tamed already. How would we get them? Is that available on the outside somewhere? I don't recall, but I do recall we were discussing putting something like that into spec so that SES can use it to reach all of the intrinsics. So
There are like
I think
three.
that's the question.
There are at least three answers to this question. One was that we do still intend to, we do still have designs that Chris is in the know about regarding ejecting the permits package to a dependency of SES. That's on the table still. There's also a proposal to add get intrinsics. Get intrinsics would be a function for, enumerating all of the intrinsics that are part of the language and possibly beyond. There's talk about a delimiter that would allow you to distinguish which intrinsics are part of the language and which ones are provided by the host. The and then probably the most germane answer to this question in the short term is that if you call lockdown, it will make, I believe lockdown makes the intrinsics that are on global this non-configurable in the start compartment. Is that true?
I don't think that's true.
That's not true? Okay. Well, that would be an interesting signal.
Maybe most people are familiar with Scuttle. Scuttle is where we, in the start compartment, delete all the globals we can delete so that if there is a sandbox escape, it is non-functional.
Yeah, it exits to a realm where there are no capabilities laying around to the extent that that is possible. It's not fully possible, but
yeah.
So the answer is no. The get intrinsics implementation Mark pointed out to me yesterday was tangled up with Harden. Not Harden, but
Hermes.
Permits. Yes. The permits and the get intrinsics are highly related features. So if we had a permits package, it might be the permits package might be the right place to have a get intrinsics shim.
Alternatively, SES could provide it as a shim for what we're intending to put in the spec in the same package.
The same
Would
package.
that be any easier?
Maybe. I mean, the notion is, well, wherever the get intrinsics shim lives has to be on top of permits in the layer cake. Currently, permits are in SES, so currently SES is the only place you could realistically implement a get intrinsics shim.
If you would indulge an ignorant question, what is a permit?
Permits are the internal data structure in SES that tells you which properties of which objects are permitted to continue to exist after lockdown.
It's also what is known as an allow list, or in an earlier age, a whitelist.
So it's sort of the taming database.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Would exposing the permits.js file as one of the SES exports make any sense?
This is why we're talking about ejecting the permits to another package. It does make sense to expose that API, but the database cannot, ideally, the database is not in an ideal form. And and going through the effort of putting it in an ideal form is not worth the effort. So it would make sense to the reason for ejecting the permits to another package would be to put it in a place where it can bump its major version without requiring SES to bump its major version.
So my overall attitude about such questions, which I've already expressed to Chris, is that when there's a lot of dependencies of things on each other, and it's not clear how to untangle that into an acyclic set of dependencies, that getting some hypotheses in mind about how it might untangle is great, but the only way you're going to actually figure it out is to try it experimentally. And I often find myself tossing off half a dozen PRs based on different intuitions of that before I finally find something that works. So this is definitely one where just try it until you find you find a untangling that seems pleasant and that actually works.
In the short term, creating a get intrinsic shim and putting it in SES is totally reasonable.
Yeah, I do have, this all does read one big question as far as the lava moat Endo relationship. Which one is the peanut butter and which one is the chocolate?
Oh, goodness.
I propose that we answer that question according to which answer creates the most puns.
Yeah.
I was thinking about layering because traditionally I think peanut butter is layered on the bottom.
Traditionally,
Ah.
chocolate
Peanut
is
butter
on
was
top.
spread on the top.
Yeah, but you usually encase it in hard chocolate.
Now, if lava moat is the chocolate, then of course mixing lava with chocolate, we get hot chocolate.
Well, and there's a chocolate lava cake.
Yeah, that's right, chocolate lava cake. I think we have our answer. Now we got to figure out what are the puns combining Endo with peanut butter.
Oh, that's easy. And Endo means within.
It's
The
the
chocolate's
nut
on
in
the
the shell.
inside. The chocolate's on the. Oh, wait, no, that doesn't work. That's the opposite. It's an exo chocolate. The candy has an exo chocolate and Endo peanut butter. That doesn't. Oh, whatever. I don't know. I don't know, guys. Let's keep on thinking about it.
Cut the recording.
Yeah, are we still recording?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, we recorded a good one by accident this time. All right. I'm going to call that the bottom of the topics unless Chris Hiller, do you remember what I was talking about? Oh yeah, we were talking about module source, and so currently the module source shim and the evasive transform are decoupled because you want to be able to use the evasive transform in cases where you're not using module source, but and this enables us to avoid exposing implementation details about Babel transforms to our public API, which is nice. It's as simple as string goes in, string comes out. This has the disadvantage that we have to do a parse twice. There is a possible optimization, and we could restructure the packages in a way that module source inherently does evasive transform. I don't think there's a good reason not to. As long as we preserve a way to do evasive, an API, the existing API on evasive transform for also using that for eval. That's all I have to say about it for now. And I think that we can call it that for a meeting.
Okay, last comment on that topic is, as far as I remember, Lav mode used to have a set of evasive transforms that were sufficient and not based on parsing. But I would have to
That's
dig
surprising.
deeper.
they were both meaning preserving and evasive and not based on parsing. That seems like a very hard trio.
They were
I think
meaning
that,
preserving enough.
yeah, that's the compromise.
Okay.
Things continued to work. It did not absolutely preserve me.
So
Yeah,
it,
so-
it would change some literal strings into having other into being other strings.
Now, one of the things I do remember is we would rename import to double underscore import or something like that consistently, so that if a function was named import, it still worked all over the place. But if it was the actual call to the real import, it would not.
But if the identifier import appears in a literal string, the literal string would be turned into a different literal string.
The word
Yes.
import, if it appeared, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, if import with opening bracket appeared, it would be changed into double underscore import, double underscore opening bracket. And
Okay.
that was the
Likewise-
trade-off.
Likewise with import appearing inside a regular expression.
Very unlikely to appear with the opening bracket.
That's true. That is true. Well, not that unlikely. It's just, import as a prefix and then some parenthesized pattern after the word import.
So
Yeah.
I believe what led us to want to parse was that we were trying to use those regular expressions, and then I tried to like dog food it on like TypeScript itself. And oh
Mhm.
boy. Yeah, no, it was not gonna play nice. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there, meta circularity tends to bring out all sorts of interesting cases.
Yeah.
Like if
and
you
then there-
find the word import in a string anywhere, it's going to be inside of a JavaScript parser.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to call it at that.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, folks.